Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Man, the last couple years we have definitely seen a migration of fishing techniques and tackle to your straight tail minnows and a lot of the stuff geared towards forward facing sonar. But I'm here to tell you we have almost completely forgotten about one category of baits that are some of the best bass catching baits that we have, specifically more so even largemouth. They catch all bass, but there is something to be said for these baits when you're targeting largemouth. So I want to kind of dive into it, just kind of make sure that you guys haven't forgotten about it yet because they catch so many fish that we don't want to just completely move them to the back of the boat. I mean, the reality here is a lot of anglers are becoming very, very one-sided when it comes to certain techniques. They are almost entirely going to minnow style baits and they're fishing for those suspended fish or the fish that are that they can use forward facing sonar with. But I'm here to tell you guys that these baits are absolutely every bit as good as they used to be. And there are times when the fish will rather eat these baits than your minnow style profiles. Now, before I share them with you, I do want to remind you that I do have a bunch of lake breakdowns that I do with fishthemoment.com. You get a bunch of different waypoints and techniques and strategies and patterns and ways to break down certain lakes for a specific time of year. So check those out. I'll put the link in the video description. I also want to point out that I do have a Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. So if you're looking to purchase some tackle, maybe some of the ones I'm talking about, please use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. You can actually bookmark it for future purchases as well. And it's very, very much appreciated. All right, so right now, like I said, everyone is really geeking out about all these different minnow baits that are coming on the market. But I'm here to tell you guys that your straight tail soft plastic worms like these guys are still every bit as good. And the reality is they work really well with forward facing sonar too. So let's break down some of my favorite worms and then we'll talk about when and where I like to use them. Now, first off here, I've got this is potentially maybe the most popular straight tail worm. This is just a zoom trick worm. They make it in like a gazillion different colors. I really do like this old purple color. It's one that a lot of companies don't make anymore, but I do catch a lot of fish on it. Here, I'll show it just so you guys can see. Straight tail worm. Nothing super fancy about it. The Berkeley Max Scent Magnum Hitworm right here. This is one of my favorites. This is the plum apple color, an absolute dynamite one. This is another one that I absolutely love that really has gotten no love on the market. It's a very new worm as well. If you watch my channel, you've seen me use it. This is the Duo Realis Wriggle Crawler. It comes in a bunch of different sizes. This is the 4.8 size. And then last but not least, one that I've kind of put on the back burner for these other three worms, but still absolutely catches fish, is the Jackal Flick Shake right here. This is the cola color one that I really like as well. Now, all of these worms are very, very similar in that they're just straight tail, skinny little worms. You know, you can get them from 3 inches all the way up to like 10 inches. The reality here is a straight tail worm is a very, very good bait at generating strikes. Now, there are times of the year where I prefer to throw them. First and foremost, during the spawn period is an absolute killer because you have fish that are relating to the bottom. These do a really good job of just kind of tantalizing the fish as they sit there. Actually, before I get into the certain seasons, let me point out the different ways I like to fish them, the different actual techniques and setups. One, you can obviously fish them in a shaky head manner. So you have some sort of jig head here that allows the bait to almost stand straight up on the bottom. Your shaky heads, which are kind of being forgotten about, absolute killer way to fish them. A lot of these worms are being thrown more in a NACO manner. So one of the ways I like to fish them is a wacky rig. Wacky rig is just a hook, a weightless one. You fish it just like that. A NACO worm is basically a wacky rig worm where you put a weight in the head so it increases the fall rate. We're seeing a lot of people fish these NACO rigs for forward facing sonar fish. Now, if we get back into the season, when I'm fishing during the spring period, I prefer to fish them on either a weightless wacky rig or a really light-weighted shaky head. Just a great way to keep your bait on the bottom, allow you to fish from shallow to relatively deep. A lot of your fish, though, are going to be relating to the bottom during that time period, whether they're getting ready to spawn, whether they're holding tight to cover or rock to grab some warmth as the water warms. But generally speaking, when the water gets into that upper 50-degree range, that's a time period where I like to start going with a shaky head. Now, through the spawn, I like to throw a wacky rig, a weightless wacky rig specifically. If I've got fish that are really up shallow, I might then start switching over to the NACO rig as well. If I have some fish that are finishing up the spawn or starting or in some really clear water times, they may have actually spawned a little out deeper, maybe in that 6 to 10 foot range. And then as the spawn progresses into the summer, I'll almost entirely go over more to the NACO rig, which is your wacky rig with a weight. And that just allows me to fish a little bit more efficiently and a little bit faster, because a lot of your fish are going to actually start moving out to some deeper water, get on some ledge type stuff or some deeper points as the water temperature warms. And I will use these baits all the way up until you start having cooling temperatures in the fall. Generally, when you start getting down, water temps start dropping into that low 60-degree range. That's when I'll move away from a lot of your straight tail worms. But the reality is, you're talking about a very large percentage of the fishing season where these baits are absolutely dynamite. Now, I got to tell you, there's a couple of things about them that I think a lot of anglers forget about. One, because you can fish them in a lot of different manners, it is a very versatile bait. You can fish them in clear water, you can fish them in deeper water, you can fish them in clear water, in dirty water, in shallow water, in deep water. Uh, you can fish them basically anywhere. So from that standpoint, they're very, very versatile baits, and that alone is a reason why you should keep it in your tackle bag. Secondly, not only are they versatile baits, but there are times where the bass just really want to key in on a worm profile. Now, I don't exactly have the answer for that, but if you're a angler that likes to fish worms, you will recognize there are times a worm is much, much more productive than, say, a jig. There's also times where they're more productive than, say, a crankbait or a moving bait. So from that standpoint, you need to have them. And you'll also find a lot of guys that are really very much into the forward-facing sonar will actually see during the warmer water period, the fish will tend to move away from some of those minnow baits, especially when they're not feeding directly on balls of shad. So fish that are not relating to a ball. If you see a fish here or a fish there, that's when the anglers, a lot of the best ones, are switching to a NACO rig, which is just a weighted worm, and they're fishing that fish, and the fish will follow it to the bottom and eat it off the bottom. And for whatever reason, they're much more willing to eat a worm off the bottom than they are a minnow cell bait that's brought up over their heads. So it's one of those baits that, especially if you're talking about pressured bodies of water and time periods where you just have fish in somewhat of a finicky mood, they tend to really key in on these worms. Now, specifically, I like the really thin ones. Now, there are bigger sizes. A lot of these companies have like magnum sizes. You can get like the magnum trick worm is like double that size. There's definitely a good time for that as well. But generally speaking, if we're talking about tough fishing period, pressured fish, or just fish that are in finicky moods, the skinnier worms, in my opinion, are much more productive than the bigger, bulkier worms. However, if the fish are in a good feeding mode, those bigger worms tend to get a little bit better average size bite. So from that standpoint, you want to keep that in mind as well. But right now, guys, it's unbelievable to me how 3 or 4 years ago, every angler that hit the water had some form of straight tail worm on their bait, whether it was a shaky head. You can also fish them on a drop shot, whether it was a wacky rig. You can pretty much fish them on almost anything. And nowadays, it's almost like nobody is using them, which for me, as an angler that likes to use them, I'm kind of okay with that. But I want to keep you guys abreast that you gotta not forget about the straight tail worms. They're just that good. They're extremely good at generating bites. And I've had some times on the water where, I may have been fishing a jig in a tournament, and I had a co-angler in the back of the boat that was just beating my butt throwing a shaky head. And as soon as I switched over to a shaky head, I started catching 2 or 3 times the number of fish that I was catching on the jig. So that's really just it's almost more of a service announcement to you guys, not to forget about them. But these 4 are the ones that I use on a very regular basis. Let me know in the comment section what are some of the ones that you really prefer to use, so you can share that with the rest of us. Otherwise, guys, if you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.